There's something about the way you make me feel inside. I'm counting down the days till we fly away, heading to the sun, only you and me. Don't wanna waste another day being stuck here in this place. No, wanna hold your hand in mine, watch the sunset in your eyes. Baby, I want us to act like we are 22 right now. Just let go, lose control, play songs on the radio too loud. This could be magical. Whoa, whoa. This could be magical. Whoa, whoa. To escape, and here we are, driving narrow streets in a rusty car, leading to the sea. Think we're getting close. We should take a pic, baby, strike a pose. I remember every day that I spent right here with you. Yeah, you are the one who makes me feel as good as I do. Baby, I want us to act like we are 22 right now. Just let go, lose control, play songs on the radio too loud. This could be magical. Whoa, whoa. This could be magical.
Good morning, everybody. If you don't know me already, my name is Jennifer. I'm a dog trainer and behavior counselor. And today we're going to have a fun little conversation about a word that's getting a lot more airtime lately. And so maybe you're already familiar with it, but there's another term that I was actually just introduced to this week, and I kind of love it because it's really important to understand these two sides of this coin. So, the word that you may already be familiar with is anthropomorphism, which is really difficult for me to say. I had to practice, but it's the longer, more scientific way to kind of describe what we do when we attribute human characteristics to things, animals, objects, that they do not have. And this is something that it's not an inherently bad thing, although it often gets a lot of bad press when it comes to animals. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So first, just to dig in a little bit more about that term, some examples of ways that we anthropomorphize. I think the biggest use probably is in either literature or television. Our familiar cartoon characters that we know best, we anthropomorphize all of the time, right? Think of, like Beauty and the Beast is a big one, right? That's an example of anthropomorphized objects. Usually, more often than not, it's animals, and we could probably think of a million examples. Can you think of some? The Jungle Book just came to mind, but there's tons, right? Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Pretty much all cartoons. Gosh, now I'm trying to think of there are cartoons where the characters are humans, but man, all of the ones that are popping up in my head, all of them are animals, right? That's all anthropomorphizing. And so that's a harmless example. Let's see, if you want to consider the fact of gods, the character of Jesus, or the gods that we depict in, all imagery really, it takes human form. That's anthropomorphizing. And even technology. I'm afraid to say it out loud because we've got these devices, but Alexa and Google, right? And our navigation systems, we give them human voices, and artificial intelligence, that's like a whole other world, where lines are getting crossed and questions are being asked, and it's really, it gets kind of confusing. We won't go there, but just it's within this realm of this subject, and I think it's so interesting, because it's not something that's black and white, and who doesn't love a little philosophical conversation, right? So those are some examples, mostly not damaging. However, the reason I'm talking about this here, on a channel where we usually just talk about dog stuff, is because we do anthropomorphize, and at least in science, anthropomorphizing has a bad rap. It's when we're trying to study a subject, an animal, objectively, scientifically, we can't just go around assuming that they have human characteristics that they do not. Otherwise, we can get lost in the forest. But it's not always a bad thing. And it does come into play when we're talking about our own pets that live in our households. I have recently been collecting a lot more criticism, given a new TikTok account that I started, with people screaming, basically, to stop humanizing dogs. And it's interesting when people say that. And for our purposes, I'm just going to kind of assume that humanizing and anthropomorphizing are interchangeable. They don't want us treating dogs as if they're humans when they are not. And that's true. They're not. They are different species. We have really crucial, important differences. However, treating them with respect and treating them as if they have feelings, which they do, and those feelings matter, and the way that we behave towards them and acknowledge their feelings affects their behavior, which makes our lives better, right? It's kind of important to be able to tell the difference, which brings me to the other word that I just learned. I didn't know that there was a counter to anthropomorphism, and that word is, I'm going to try and say this one right. I think it's a little bit easier, but anthropodenial. Which is basically just the opposite. It is the rejection of shared characteristics between humans and animals when they do in fact exist. Blindness to the human, just our shared characteristics. And that can be just as damaging. So to give you some examples of how this comes into play, the big one that comes up the most is for anthropomorphism, when we attribute a human characteristic that dogs may not have. The big one that comes to mind always is guilt, especially on social media. Everybody posts videos of their dog looking guilty. And the consensus among educated dog behavior professionals is that that look is not actually guilt, it's fear. And part of the reason that we don't want to go and give them this cognitive ability, give them this characteristic, is because the feeling of guilt requires some higher cognitive processes that we don't believe dogs have. It seems very basic to us because we all know that feeling. We've all felt it because we're human and we do have those cognitive processes. But guilt requires that someone have an understanding of social norms, an understanding of right and wrong, like a moral sense, and possibly the ability to feel shame, to self-analyze, none of which we believe dogs have. So why then would we assume that they have guilt? Now, the physical appearance that we label as guilt in dogs can look like how we would show guilt, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what's going on internally is the same thing. And so this is an example of a trait that we attribute to dogs that they don't necessarily have, and it can have damaging consequences, both for the dog and for the relationship, the bond between the human and the dog. Because how this usually plays out, if we do assume that they have this trait, is we think, well, if they understand right and wrong, if they have the ability to feel guilty, then they will understand the punishment that is applied after they act out or misbehave. But think about, how would you approach this differently if it wasn't guilt? If they couldn't actually even feel guilt? How would you approach it if that look was just fear? Would that change how we behave? It would change how I behave. I mean, and it does. It absolutely does. I didn't always behave with dogs, with animals, the way that I do now because I didn't think about this stuff and I didn't know better. So let's see. Darn typo. No guilt in dogs. We definitely need to hear this more. We read human emotions, but unless we ask, we don't actually know what feeling someone is experiencing. How much more we don't understand dogs. Yeah, I mean, and there is a limit, at least currently, right? There's a limit to what we can understand because there's a limit to the ways that we're able to study this. But we've learned so much more just in the last decade or so, what with the ability to train dogs to sit for an fMRI, where we can actually see pictures of their brain activity. I mean, excuse me, guys. itchy nose. Yeah, so we are learning more in recent years, which is really exciting, and I think that will only continue to learn more. But as of right now, yeah, guilt is it's we there's anthropomorphizing can go wrong, as demonstrated by the guilt situation. Hey, Beyond 280. Kevin says, I'm pretty sure my dog has higher cognitive powers than me. So, and I know you're joking, but it is interesting because and when I say we, I'm just kind of talking about humans in general. We tend to assume that because we're pretty much at the highest point on the food chain and we kind of control most of everything in the world, it's kind of up to us. We assume that if there were like a graph and you had columns for every individual cognitive ability, or emotional ability, maybe those are one and the same, let's just lump them all in there. And I know this is a bit of an oversimplification, but we assume that our capabilities are at the top for every trait in relation to all other species. That's not actually true. So you might actually be right. Now we'd have to like analyze an individual trait and get all scientific about it, which can be really fun. I'm totally not prepared to do that today, but just as a general concept, absolutely dogs could have certain higher cognitive abilities than us. Certainly birds do. Like counting comes to mind. You would think, I mean, oh God, I love this example because yeah, we're humans and we're the smartest species, right? So we should be able to count better than animals, lowly animals, right? But there are plenty of bird species whose memory and counting ability is like insanely better than ours. They can keep track of seed deposits that they have, not only the numbers, but the different locations that they put their different seeds, and over a much longer span of time than we would be able to. So it's just an example of, yeah, some animals in certain traits could have higher powers than we humans do. And it gets so weedy when we start talking about intelligence, right? Because really, what is intelligence? The definition that I've come to like best is the ability to adapt and succeed really, really well within your environmental niche. And so that's why some birds are really, really good at counting. They have to remember where they put all their food caches. And that makes them really, really successful in their niche. So that said, that means that of course every animal who's evolved to this point and still is in existence has done so because they've gotten really, really good at what they need to do to survive. So the counting and the memory stuff is interesting, but let's label that like a cognitive ability. But how about emotional abilities too? If anybody has watched, I know around the time Blackfish came out, there was another documentary about killer whales also, or orcas, and I became convinced, and I haven't done like a ton more research into this, but I'm pretty convinced that orcas and possibly even other animals might feel emotions even more deeply than we can. And if you can't imagine that, think about this. Vision, like color, the ability to see colors, we suspect certain other animals, the ones that come to mind are some species of butterflies, I want to say, and definitely the mantis shrimp. supposedly they're able to see a far vaster spectrum of colors. They're able to see part of the light spectrum that is not visible for us humans, you know? And you can't even imagine that. So if it's hard to imagine feeling any more deeply than you already do, I mean, the depths of sadness and depression that we've been through, and the highest joys that you've experienced, and the love and the social bonds that we're able to develop. Imagine somebody else being able to feel that, but so much more. Like, it's possible, you know? So anyway, anthropomorphism, mostly harmless until it starts causing damage to our relationships. And so it can go wrong. However, I think the bigger problem these days is the flip side. It's anthropodenial, the denial of shared characteristics that we do have, and acknowledging that dogs do have emotions. We have plenty of shared emotions that are worth acknowledging, and treating them with, I hate to use the word respect, but it fits here, but just, yeah, treating them with respect, treating them like if you were sad, or if you were mourning, or if you were afraid. Fear is the big one, right? Or just uncomfortable and wanted to have better physical boundaries with and more control over your own body and what happens to it. Those are traits that we share with dogs, and denying them causes far more damage. So when I hear people come at me or anybody and deny that dogs have feelings, or deny that we should be treating them like we have feelings, I see the repercussions that can come from that, and I wanna talk about it. I wanna educate around it, because it's, you know, we do love our dogs. I feel like even the people who say those things, if they have a dog, I'm sure that they love their dog, and I'm sure that they want to take care of them as best that they can. But maybe they're not aware of the damage being done because of that unwillingness to acknowledge our similarities, you know? And I know for myself that the reason that I'm so passionate about this subject particularly is because, oh God, I hope my family's not watching this ever. But, you know, I suffered. I have some lasting trauma, as most of us do, from the ways that I was treated as a child, you know, by the adults in my environment, you know? And it's no one did this intentionally. I was not intentionally abused or anything like that. But the lack of knowledge, or the lack of awareness of how our actions affect people who are vulnerable or do not have a voice, can do some serious damage. Intention, while important, it's not everything. And being aware of this stuff can really help protect the voiceless, like our dogs. God, I feel like this got so serious, but I'm hurt, you know, and most of us are, but because of from that experience comes the desire, the very strong desire to want to do better, not just for me, and not just for the animals in my life, but for people. Like, I think acknowledging this and slowly creating better habits, shifting the way that we ourselves behave, it's going to have really beautiful ripple effects in the world. And that's where I see this could go. And that's why I talk about it. So, yeah. I'd like to share a quote with you that Franz de Waal he's written some books. I'm not sure, a primatologist or ethologist. I'm not exactly sure the title he uses, but he has written a few books that I really, really like. And so one of the quotes that he has is, "To endow animals with human emotions has long been a scientific taboo. But if we do not, we risk missing something fundamental about animals and us." And I just think that's so beautiful. Kevin says, "Dogs, like humans, learn fear. It is learned from your environment." Kevin, you're absolutely right. It is learned, and that is one of the main 5 ways that fear can come about. We could dig into the other ways that fear happens, but we might save that for another day. I have touched on it in past live streams, and it is so fascinating too, and it is worth talking about, because again, our actions even before an animal comes into the world can affect the fear that the amount of fear that they have, or the type of fear that they have, and again, that's going to affect your animal's behavior and potentially your relationship with that animal, your life. So yeah, fear. There's several ways that fear can happen. One is from your environment, and your past experience. But yeah, and it's really important to acknowledge how easily it can happen. Fear is the easiest thing for an animal, human or non-human animal, to develop. It's so easy to come into existence and so difficult to remove, and it's why we should take such care in preventing it as best we can. And that doesn't just go for animals, that goes for humans too. I've been starting to consume a lot of like gentle parenting content, and I probably will not have kids in this life, and so you wouldn't think that I'd be out there like trying to learn about like child rearing, but this stuff, it's so the same thing, and it's one way that I think that anthropomorphizing, even if they're not truly shared traits, at least it doesn't cause damage, you know? Hi, Sandy. Welcome. So that's really all I had to say about it. I think it's worth thinking about, and acknowledging that we do absolutely have shared traits, and just because they're just a dog doesn't mean that we can't treat them like they have feelings, because we haven't, I mean, historically, and as a kind of globally, we haven't really acknowledged that they do have feelings, and they deserve to be treated, you know, and protected from such things as fear, like Kevin said. So yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I was really excited about learning about the term anthropodenial, because again, that's really going to do far more damage than anthropomorphism can. Final thought. I wonder, the people who do feel the need to voice this sort of criticism of humanizing our animals, I wonder why that is. You know, I can kind of get there, because I do recall a time in my life when I felt that my friends cared so much more about their animals and did not treat humans with the same amount of respect. And from that, and probably from my own, you know, experiences and my own insecurities, perhaps, I felt a little bit resentful, you know, and I could easily see a leap to saying like, oh my gosh, don't humanize your animals, like that's dumb, or it's bad, or, you know, things like that. I could see that. But I wonder if is it the same reason for everyone else who has that criticism? Does anyone else have any insight as to why that might be? Because I think it's, if that's the reason, I think it's absolutely valid because, again, my reason for being passionate about this topic is that we don't treat each other well, just human to human. And if we can't, you know, if we can't do that with one or the other, like it's I don't know, it's the same, right? But absolutely, I'm not. I've become more. I mean, oh gosh, the criticism. I've become more critical of those sayings. You know, people put it. It's like everywhere now on shirts and mugs and just everywhere. Where like the more people I meet, the more I like my dog, or this is why I like dogs more than people, or dogs are better than people, or you know, and like. I get it. I get it. There's no your dog can't judge you, you know, and your dog's always going to be there for you, and they are going to in some ways I totally get it. But at the same time, it kind of smells like we're not going to treat other people well. We're not taking it as a lesson to learn from and then share with our fellow humans. And that hurts. You know, and it's going to perpetuate this state that we're in, where maybe we treat animals well, maybe we don't, but regardless, we're still not treating humans well, and that's something that we need more of in this world right now. I mean, would anybody disagree with me there? I feel like that's something we can all agree on, is that we need more kindness with each other in this world. Okay, now I'm done. Now I'm done talking about that. Do you guys have any thoughts that you want to share? Thanks, Kevin, for the heart. Gosh, you thought I was gonna cry. No, not today. Not today, guys. Anyway, yeah, no, I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear specifically if you have anything, any insight as to why people might vehemently want to argue that we shouldn't be humanizing or shouldn't be anthropomorphizing our dogs. Oh, yeah, absolutely. More kindness for others, but also for ourselves. 100%. Paul, hi! Nice to see you here. The world is lacking love and kindness. It is. It really is. And I know, like, gosh, they teach us, supposedly, as kids, you know, if you want to see more of that in the world, it's got to start with you. And it's hard. It's so hard. And I am so far from perfect. And I am not saying that to, you know, as just a line. Like, I have a lot of work to do. But I think it's so important that the work is worth doing, you know? And so I'm at a point in my journey where I'm like re-upping this commitment to doing better for you, for me, for everybody, and for the animals too. But for me, the animals were kind of the lesson, you know? Paul, maybe you can remind me where that quote came from. If you want to learn about love, start with plants and animals because they're easier. I had heard that quote years and years ago before I even thought of training dogs or working with animals at all. And it was just kind of like a, yeah, okay, that's kind of cheesy, whatever. I didn't really think about it. But today, after going through the process of education about, you know, with animals and with behavior that I have, and realizing where that passion comes from, which is human relationships, the quote has a lot more meaning to me today, because it's just so much truer than I thought, you know. So, yeah. It's so cheesy, I know, guys, but but I don't know. If we acknowledge that the world is lacking in love and kindness, and we'd like it to be different, and it's got to start somewhere. What can we do about it, you know? What can we do when someone hurts you? When someone, you know, says something hurtful? Even if, you know, even when their intent is just to be malicious. How do we respond to that? You know, when the lessons that I've learned from dog training is that when our dogs are misbehaving, or acting out, or it is Buddha. Okay, thanks. We don't punish, right? It might help in the short term change the behavior, but it's not going to fix it long term, and it is absolutely going to do damage to that animal and to your relationship. So we know that we don't punish misbehavior for animals. So what would that mean for responding to humans who misbehave or act out? I said it. That was your quote. So anyway, all right. I feel like I've rambled on enough this morning. But hopefully, I don't know, this is at least, at the very minimum, just food for thought. I know it took me a long time to even get to the point where I am today. And like I said, I still feel like I'm kind of at the beginning of a journey, but I would like to maybe not be the only one on that journey. So we should try to follow the 3 R's, Paul says: respect for self, respect for others, and responsibility for all your actions. Yeah. And you know what's funny about that? I feel like, for me at least, the easiest one of those 3 is respect for others. And that's still not easy. Respect for self, really hard. Responsibility for your actions, that can be really hard. All of this is really hard, but it's upsetting. It makes me really angry to see people who can acknowledge this stuff and then just not think it worth their time. You know, because it's going to hurt others, but it's going to hurt them too. And maybe anger is not the appropriate emotion or the appropriate emotional response to that. But where does anger come from? Anger, I mean, maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's a feeling of powerlessness. And we are powerless if we really get down to it. But it's also, I don't know, it's also like, if I can reframe it for myself and just look at it more like it's because I have this hope that things could be better. And when there are ways that we could make it better and we don't take advantage of it, it's hard to watch. But anyway, again, I can only take responsibility for my own actions. I can only control my own actions. And so this is my renewed commitment, and I will continue to make that. I think I'll have to continue to renew it because I will fail. But today, this is my renewed commitment to trying to do better, trying to practice those 3 R's. So respect for self, respect for others, and responsibility for all of your actions, my actions. Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And that is a beautiful quote. That's one I've loved for a long time, because it's, at least don't hurt them. But you have to know you're hurting them. And when you can't acknowledge that, that's the responsibility for your actions piece, right? No, it's so hard. It's so hard. Okay. All right. Now I'm done. Now that's it. All right, cool. thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for your input and sharing the quotes. I I appreciate all of it. So yeah, hopefully this has given you some food for thought today. And yeah, we'll do this again soon. All right. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It does help me out with your support by subscribing or liking and commenting. And if you want to do more, there are some ways down in the comments, of course. So yeah, thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you being here, and have a great week. Rest of your weekend. All right. Bye.